Everyone, welcome to what we call in the business a very special episode of the morning meeting. Dan, Sean, and I will take you through the day, but we're going to start with two big elements. First, some breaking news from two-way about the president's national security team, and then David Burrell is here to run through our first People's Poll, a poll unique as far as we know, where Sean, Dan, and I and other two-way colleagues submitted questions, but so did members of the two-way community. A national poll that David will walk through the deck, tell you the latest results on the president and trade and a whole bunch of issues. And again, great input from the two-way community in our first People's Poll. Gentlemen, good morning. Sean, what's your history of writing poll questions?
Actually fairly good. We did, I mean, I did my first campaign in 94. So you always review it and think of what's missing or figure out. I think more importantly, it's not just it's tweaking the question because as everybody knows, sometimes what you write will determine what you get back. So, I got a solid 30 years, I'd
Yeah.
say.
Dan, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, on the fundraising side, when I was younger, we weren't included, really at all. But as I got older and more experienced, I was brought in and people would say, "Hey, what do you think of this or that?" And Sean's right. It's all about how you ask that question. I knew candidates who wanted certain answers. So polls were slanted that way, and those who really wanted to know what was going on. And that is just fascinating.
All right, so we'll get to the poll in a minute. We had planned to start off with it. Not much on the daybook today. The president's doing a prayer event and then going to Alabama for a commencement speech, and the vice president's in South Carolina doing a steel event. Not much else going on. Schumer and Jeffries are both having press conferences. Okay, so this morning, just to take you a little bit behind the curtain, I was headed into my location to do the program, and I got a text from a very nice source who said, "You want to call me?" And it turns out that three different people, two, the original source and two others, have confirmed that the plan now by the White House is to remove the National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, who was on Fox News this morning, just not that long ago, and his deputy, Alex Wong, and much of the current staff team at the National Security Council because of unhappiness throughout the national security establishment of how they're doing. The West Wing's unhappy, the State Department, the Treasury, unhappiness. And of course, this was around before Signalgate. It was widely reported that Signalgate, ironically, may have saved Waltz's job because the president didn't want to be seen as if he were giving in to Jeffrey Goldberg, his new best friend. But there's lots of levels of unhappiness, and it's less about Signalgate than it is about, as I understand it from my sources, a general belief that it's not being run efficiently in an organized way. It may not. It may happen as early as today. It may not happen ever because it's Donald Trump. But the plan is for it to happen soon, maybe this weekend. One source says this weekend. We'll see. But the original choice to replace the National Security Advisor for many in the government was a guy named Christopher Landau. He's currently the Deputy Secretary of State. He is said to be doing such a good job and is so valuable to Marco Rubio that Rubio says, no, you can't have my guy. So he's got job lock because he's doing well. Some people have experienced that. You know what that's like. So Landau, I'm told, will not get the job, even though he's very highly thought of because he's so highly thought of. A candidate that's being discussed who has support at very high levels within the administration is Steve Witkoff, the president's friend and special envoy to everything. Witkoff has a lot of senior level support, but he also has enemies. And two of my three sources pointed me to this, a New York Post story that ran yesterday. Very strange story popped up in the New York Post in the middle of the day yesterday, savaging Steve Witkoff with anonymous quotes saying he's way over his head. He shouldn't be leading the Russian negotiations, that other countries are confused by him, that people in the government think he's amateurish. The story was filled with savage blind quotes. Do we have the money quote, Paul? I don't know if we do or not. There we go. Nice guy, but a dumbling effing idiot, this person said of Witkoff. He should not be doing this alone, meaning negotiating these deals. Now, will his critics be more happy with him as head of the NSC? Not according to my sources. And they believe that some people believe that the reason the Post story popped up was because word was beginning to spread that Waltz was out and that Witkoff was his likely replacement. And what the speculation is, this New York Post story is aiming at stopping that. One more item for me. And
By the way, the thing that's not, I know we always focus on the headline. I brought this up before. I also focus on the byline. Because you can always figure out, or at least the breadcrumbs are there, who's leaking it. And that wasn't one of the Post's White House reporters. That was actually their Pentagon reporter, national security report. I mean, so you can tell where that came from, right? Which side is pushing that?
Yep.
Because it wasn't like it just got dropped by one of their White House beat reporters.
Yeah, I see in the chat people are saying, well, the reason Wong and Waltz are out is because they're neocons. Again, my reporting is that this has to do with competence, not ideology. That people just don't believe they're running the NSC in enough of a professional manner. Lastly, we saw the president in a photo op with Pete Hegseth yesterday in the cabinet, made it kind of semi-awkward joke about Hegseth. Susie Wiles and other senior officials have made it clear to Pete Hegseth he has to get the Pentagon staffed at the senior level by people who know how to run the building, who are, in the word used over and over, adults. And so don't be surprised if a part of the storyline here, in addition to my sources saying Waltz and Wong on their way out, will be more experienced senior people at the Pentagon. Pete Hegseth, I don't know that, this is not what my sources said, but the mood music is he's got one more chance to get this right. He has to bring in people, he has to staff it right, and he has to stop having these big controversies. So, Sean, your overall reaction to what we're reporting here?
My overall reaction is that it's not, I mean, look, there's always, I'm surprised that it took 100 days for people to get the knives out. I had been given the team really high marks for how well they were operating together and cohesively, et cetera. So we'll see how this plays out. To your point, the thing with Trump is that, that we also saw the National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, out this morning on Fox and Friends talking up the successes that they've had. Now, they're not his, because he talked about recruiting goals and actually falls more into Hegseth's world. But I think that part of what they're trying to remind clearly the president is, hey, things are going well on the national security front. We are addressing a lot of these big issues, morale and recruiting and focus on shipbuilding and weaponry and things like that. So if he's having a good deal on the heels of, by the way, a very, very big Ukraine deal announcement last night, which I will say, if we want to talk about who's down, watching Scott Bessent in that video last night was huge, right? This is a big deal for the Treasury Secretary last night to really show, if you want to talk about who's ascent and who's doing well. But I think the one thing I will tell you about Trump is that when things are going really well, he's probably more hesitant to do something that will, from a personnel standpoint, shake things up. So it'll be interesting to see. My guess is that, like, if you get through the weekend, and remember, you mentioned the thing today, Trump is getting on a plane at, I think, 10 a.m. or going to the prayer breakfast at 10 and then heading to Alabama, from Alabama back to Mar-a-Lago. So to me, it's sort of like, if he doesn't make if a decision hasn't been made already, and I get the sense that it hasn't, then you as long as he's not around, that's a good sign, right? So it's almost like if you're Waltz, you just bought another 4 or 5 days, because he's leaving. He's going to end up in Palm Beach tonight, and not be back till probably Monday, I guess.
Yeah, let me agree with one thing and partially disagree with another, and then go to Dan. Sometimes you report something based on sources and it doesn't come true. It's called a permanent scoop. Okay, let me be clear. Donald Trump may not do this. Everybody says he's going to do it. He's let it be known that's his plan. So the thing I partially do agree with, I do believe it is a quote unquote final decision. I do believe he's made up his mind, but he could change his mind.
Well, no. So here's the thing. If he has made up his mind, right, I can see a scenario where today, whether it's on Air Force One or whatever, there's a Truth Social that comes out and says, I want to thank my good friend for serving this, and here's who's doing it, kind of how he's made some personnel changes in the past. But that means the decision is locked and loaded, and there's no changing it. Yeah. If that decision has not been made, which at least the New York Post story seems to suggest, but that's more of a hit against Witkoff than it is against
100%. And what could delay a decision or an announcement, or could allow Waltz to keep his job, even though the current plan is for him not to keep his job. They can't find an alternative. They can't find a replacement. They don't want to announce
I will say
departure
that we
without
with
a successor.
With Flynn and McMaster, where he had Flynn leave, and then people brought people, including General McMaster, down to Mar-a-Lago to interview.
In this case, they don't want to do that. I'm told they want to announce the replacement. There's about to be a White House briefing. I wouldn't be surprised if it came
it started.
Up. Yeah, I'm saying it's just underway. So we'll monitor that, and if they start to ask about Waltz, we'll go to it. Dan, what are your thoughts on this reporting?
I actually think I say this as in all seriousness, I think it's a real positive. I think it shows that Trump and Susie Wiles and the team understand there are problems. We've talked about this for a while, that Pete Hegseth in normal conditions would never be Secretary of Defense for anybody, just given his track record of management prior and his so far track record of management today. The national security, there has not been as much leaking about how disorganized like the kitchen is, behind the door. But by all accounts, Mark, from what you've said and a few others, it is, pretty bad. So I give him credit. Like a lot of administrations, it's easy to just dig in and say, I won't give a scalp. It's another thing to say we have to make a change. Now, how do we do it? So I actually give them credit.
I will say his answer to Terry Moran the other day with saying, he's doing a great job, whatever. Trump generally doesn't do that. If he's not happy with someone, he'll say, they're getting along and, we're working. Like if he's not confident in you, there's a little bit more of a tell. And I felt like that remark to Terry Moran on the ABC interview showed that at least for that point that, he seemed pretty strong with Pete.
Yeah. I think he's strong with Pete if Pete fixes it. He's giving Pete a full chance to fix it, but
yeah,
he's got to fix it. Got to fix it.
And like I said, I wouldn't be surprised to see, and I mean this in all seriousness. I said this the other day, like a General Kellogg, who's 3-star retired, come in, but somebody who's got stars on their shoulder, who is in Trump MAGA world. There's a couple other guys that were there with us in the 2016 campaign. We had well over, hundreds of flag officers. Support the president, get somebody in there who's been around the building a few times, but has solid MAGA credentials. Well, anyway, there's General Tata. There's a bunch of these guys that I think would show that he actually has someone MAGA approved that's been in the building.
Yep, absolutely. All right, we'll monitor the White House briefing, folks. You guys will just bring it in if we see that she's being asked about Waltz. We'll continue to see if what else is reported on that. I'll say again, the current plan is for the National Security Advisor and his deputy and much of his team to be replaced. But Donald Trump is not final till Donald Trump puts it on Truth Social or says it in some other way. So we shall see. Let's go now to the People's Poll. David Burrell, our polling partner at WIC, joins us. David, thank you. This poll is special in some ways and unique in others. Here's why it's special. Big sample, 1,000 people. You see a lot of polls that are 500 people, 300 people. Done quickly because of David's methodology, which we'll talk about in a second. But what makes it unique is it's the People's Poll. It's the poll of this community. 15 of you got to submit questions, probably in the case of, I guess, all of you, maybe one or two not. First time you ever got to write a poll question. And so David's going to run through. He'll highlight ones that came from the community. Sean and Dan and I also got to submit questions. And the idea is we can do this on a basis where we as a community can sample public opinion, and we can ask about what we want to ask about. And because David's methodology allows polls to be turned relatively quickly, we can be on the news together and sample public opinion that way. So, David, so grateful as always to partner with you. First, tell people about the basic methodology. How many people do you survey? How do you do your polls? And what's are your polls fake or partisan? That's a softball.
No, our polls are not partisan. We've done polling for a lot of nonprofits on both sides for a long time. But this poll was, one of the funnest we've ever done because it's the first time I've also been able to get questions from just regular voters, regular Americans, the two-way community, as well as some great questions from the two-way team. So as Mark said, it's 1,000 completes, and there's a lot of different ways our company does polling. Some of it's probability polling, where you're randomly calling people or randomly texting people. You've all probably gotten some of those texts, whether you like them or not. And also, but there's other types of polling that are through panels, which are panels of people who have opted in to take polls. And a lot of the polls you see online are done through this. And the advantage of them is two things. One is we can turn them around very fast because the people who are taking the polls are actually incentivized and paid to. And secondly, is we can ask a lot of questions. And like Mark said, that allowed us to get over 15 questions from the two-way community, questions from the two-way team, a lot of those questions that you're going to see here in the presentation.
Okay, Dave, thank you for that. And again, so grateful to you and your team, Peyton and the others at WIC. Go ahead and roll the deck, and Sean and Dan will jump in when they want to add in or ask questions.
Okay, it looks like I need
Yep, they will make you a co-host right now.
You just did that. You just became okay. That's awesome. Welcome.
Guys, David's all set. There you go, David. Feel free. Share the screen.
And once, whoops. Stop. Sorry, guys.
That's all right.
Okay. We up?
Yes, sir.
All right,
There you
great.
go.
Okay, again, we fielded this on Tuesday and Wednesday. I mean, here we are on Thursday going through the results, and this is what we hope to continue. Favorability of the key figures, and then some grading of the president. Also, this includes a question from Dean, one of the two-way community members. So first 100 days in, I want to start with favorability. So this isn't too far off from what you've probably seen in a lot of polls. Trump is slightly underwater, Vance is tracking with him, and Musk is very unpopular. Interestingly, the most popular person that we measured, which actually came from a two-way community member as well, was Zelensky, more popular than any Republican institution, Democratic institution, or key figure.
David, look at that Bernie Sanders was at +6. That's interesting. And AOC -5. And I mean, that's, yep.
Yeah, and please do stop me at any time as we're going through.
Just
but that's true. I will note on Bernie being higher is interesting. Also, his issue is his ceiling is, you see that 41% favorability. His issue is he can't get his ceiling too much higher than that.
Yep.
Well, but it does look at in a net favorability.
Yeah, I will say, especially on the Zelensky thing, that the thing that's always sticks out to me is, it's a plus favorability, but he's also highly, no opinion or unknown. So it's sort of like among the people who answered.
Yeah. And Mark, can you confirm that everyone's seeing the slides?
Yes, sir. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Okay, good.
We're all in rapture.
All right, cool. Awesome. Well, moving on, this is a little bit similar, but somewhat different. We asked job performance, which is different than favorability, and as well as job performance on certain issues. You'll notice here that the job performance is a -8 overall, which again, his favorability was a -3. So you're seeing that even some people have a favorable opinion of Donald Trump are not approving of his performance so far. As you can see, the high is on security and immigration, whereas the low is clearly on economy. We got a question in from Dean from the two-way community, very in theme with the first 100 days, that wanted to ask, which of the below do you think is the biggest accomplishment in the first 100 days of the Donald Trump administration? Very similar to what you're seeing in the job approval. It was, centered on immigration, with reducing border crossings is #1, with deportation of illegal immigrants is #2. And of course, there's always that 30% that said he did not have any accomplishment. I will point out here, though, that there's not a lot of high numbers for trade or economy, which is going to be thematic as we kind of keep going through here.
Well, and it also explains why they keep going back to immigration when they hit bumps in the road.
Yeah, all right. And for better or worse, and this is always interesting, and right when a president takes office, it's his economy. But you're seeing here in the numbers, the percentage of people who say this is Trump's economy now, even only 100 days in, and these numbers probably would have been held true even a month or so ago. As soon as a president take office, it's they don't get a lot of time for their economic agenda to earn credibility. And lastly on this, we also asked, just generally speaking, with the first 100 days, would you give Trump, what job performance would you give? Or grade would you give him on his job performance? And I highlighted a couple of numbers here on the right rather, that I think are a little bit telling. And that's that only 20% said A or B of independents, whereas 60% of independents said D or F. And I think those are the worrisome numbers for Trump when I look at the first 100 days. I won't stop there. Dan, Sean, do you want me to go back on anything? I'm going to tariffs next.
No, I mean, when I look at that one, the party breakdown, it's interesting because you always hear like 92% of Republicans support Trump. They're strong with Trump. The base is strong. And when you see that, it's like, okay, half of it is super strong in the A category, but the B, C, like that says there's a little bit of concern.
Yeah, I agree. I think that we'll kind of come back to this maybe a little bit as we get into the tariff section too, because I think it's kind of some interesting things there. All right, so next section here, tariffs. Dan, one of your questions was in here as well. So we start off with actually Sean's question. Really wanted to break down the different purposes of tariffs, the potential purposes of tariffs, and see where people's favorability on it was. And I think this is interesting, and this can be thematic throughout the rest of this section. And that's that when asked if they were support opposed the use to create a level playing field for U.S. companies, plus 24%. To incentivize U.S. manufacturing, plus 20%, and to reduce the federal deficit, plus 12%. So, despite some of the negative ramifications for Trump's image, I think, of the tariffs as they're being implemented now and as they're shaking out, they are not, we have a typo on that page, but they are certainly not unpopular as a potential means as an economic tool. And this is from Batya on tariffs on the 2A team. She asked.
Hey, David, I apologize, but if you go back no, you don't need to go back, but at some point, what I would love to know is how much overlap there is among the three things, meaning some folks that I've talked to said part of the reason that the Trump administration speaks to all three of those messages is that some people believe that deficit tariffs are good. I'd love to know, again, we don't need to obviously do it now, but at some point, like how much overlap is there? Because to me, I still believe that first one, the level playing one that President Trump has talked about for decades, is clearly, and it's indicated in the polling, is the strongest one. The pushback you get from a lot of people is, yeah, but the people who think the deficit and the people who think onshoring don't necessarily share the first view, so that you're trying to hit all three audiences. So I'm intrigued by the question.
Yeah, I like that question too. And I know my team's listening to the show right now, so we'll make some notes and get that answer out. So y'all can all share it via email and even on your other shows. But yeah, so my team will get on that and we'll actually get that answer. I'm interested in that one too. Similarly on the kind of purpose of tariffs and where people are generally speaking on them, which statement best reflects your view of the economic impacts? Tariffs are generally beneficial because they protect the American industries and workers, 21%. Tariffs can be useful in specific situations, but must be used with caution at 35%. And then just 33% saying tariffs are generally harmful because they raise the cost and reduce U.S. competitiveness. And again, this was another 218 question. And you are seeing a major class or at least income split in this crosstab over here of the
I think it's interesting that 100,000 to 250 is the highest in beneficial. I wonder if that's kind of white collar jobs beginning to morph overseas in services.
I think so too. I would love to get Batya's opinion on it too. I know she had some underlying thoughts and hypothesis on this of why she even asked the question in the first place. So maybe we'll get that. Moving on, we have two more. I like this one as well. This is thinking about short-term and long-term outcomes. Which one of these you most agree with? Think most likely to occur: short-term pain but long-term gain. That went out at 53%, whether short-term pain and long-term pain at 47%. And I think the party splits are very interesting here as well. I'll stay on there for a second for you all to see it. And then moving on to the last question on the tariffs, and this is from Dan. I think we're kind of seeing something here across a lot of slides that despite how tariffs are shaking out now and maybe some of the displeasure, there is, generally speaking, registered voters in America are not completely against tariffs. And, even Harris voters from 2024, only 45% said they're not willing to give them any chance. So I thought this was a great question.
What I love about this is, and this is what I've said and what the Frank Luntz focus group revealed the other day, is that the media will doom and gloom all this stuff. And this gets back to this idea that Trump has been talking about it. The American people knew. Dan, I think Dan brings up, he never was specific about the quote pain that would cause economically, but people are, I think, aware of what he's trying to do and the significance of bringing back. And I think that this answer reveals that they're willing to give Trump the leash to do what's in the long-term interest of the country.
Well, and I think the challenge is for them, I agree with you, Sean, that people are, and I think most of the country is rooting for Trump to be successful. Challenge they're going to keep having is executives have to plan and forecast. And that is, so like, you're going to keep getting bad headlines because they're speaking the truth, right? Like we don't know. we're having to lay people off. We're unsure. And then people are like, God, I kind of hope he's successful, but I'm nervous.
No, Dan, I think both y'all nailed it. And this is, and the data in these slides is pretty much saying exactly that.
Yeah. It's why it's a pickle for Democrats, for tariffs. They're not just saying 100% hell no. And that's an opening for Trump.
Right. I do think it's going to be very interesting to see if some of these trade deals do get announced, how that is going to impact public opinion on the general opinion on the economy, as well as Trump's performance on tariffs as well. Like you're saying, they're not against it necessarily.
Yep.
Okay, great. So now a little bit of a rapid fire. We have more questions in this. I just don't have time to do the slides. And please definitely stop me again, Mark and Sean and Dan, anytime you want to go through it. But otherwise, I'm going to kind of move through relatively quickly, just so we make sure everyone's gets seen. Got a great question from another Dan, a different Dan from the two-way community on due process.
Smart Dan, not this Dan. Yep.
Yes. And it said, the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution declares that no person shall be, deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Should non-citizens who are in the country illegally be entitled to due process protections, specifically protections that might limit or delay their deportation? I love this question. It's actually a really well-written public opinion question, as opposed to saying, hey, this MS-13 criminal, do you think that he should still be in the country? This is a good question. You see that America is very evenly split on it. And that also, even if you look at the party crosstabs, I think they're very interesting as well, because it's not as polarizing as you might think from just the GOP saying no.
And that's why I think it's so important, because our first instinct was that the Garcia stuff was a slam dunk for Trump. And I've said this for the last few weeks. It's not. Like, it is. I find this remarkable that it's split, because people have said the due process stuff is wimpy and weak and it's terrible. Doesn't appear to be a losing argument.
Yeah, but there's a difference. And this is, again, I mean, to David's point, how this is asked matters. Yeah. This says generic person A, You start saying a gangbanger that's wife's accused him of the following that did the following.
But there's no poll that supports that, Sean, because
well, here's the deal. Common sense tells me if a blank individual with no rap sheet, 56% of Republicans and 41% of independents think that the generic good guy should go, then bad guy definitely goes.
There's also another element to this as well. That is, we had to add in a bit of a definition of what due process is and Fifth Amendment. And so, when you do layer and Dan, this may have padded the numbers a little for, I guess, the Democrats, if you want to put it that way.
The only thing is almost every public poll has said 50% think he should come back, and 30% think he should stay. Again, I think it's bad for Democrats, but it's not a winner for Trump. That's the point I want to make.
This is a great question. And again, I want to keep. I know people are here to get the analysis. That's why we're talking through it. But I just want to make sure we get through some. So I'm going to move to the next one. This is a great one from Stephen, the two-way community. The question was basically, which statement do you agree with more regarding RFK Jr.'s proposal to remove soft drinks like Coke and Pepsi from SNAP? And again, another great question. The proposal is a good idea because they're generally unhealthy and should never have been covered by taxpayer money in the first place, or it's a bad idea, targets low-income minority communities, and there's racial discrimination. So as you can see, across the board, especially with GOP and independents.
Yeah, you know what I'll say again. I love this question. Kudos to Stephen. Who asked it? But I will say the interesting thing is, I think from that plays to the to one angle of the no. I think there's also some conservatives that believe that it's a choice issue, that you shouldn't. I mean, anyway, I think this is great news for the Maha world. And for RFK and Sarah Sanders and Brooke Rollins, who are really focused on the SNAP piece of this. But this just shows you, I mean, you look at this thing, it's a huge winner with the Republicans, good with the independents, and not bad with Democrats.
Yeah, Dan, I'm sorry, Sean, I'll say two things on this again. One is that I like this question because it's not a strict public opinion question where you go out there and say, oh, this is exactly where America is on SNAP, but you're giving people's real viewpoints. You're saying between viewpoint 1 and viewpoint 2, which do you align with more, which is a different type of insight. And I think, like you said, it does bode well, but there are other angles. And I'll tell you, one of the questions we even ask, which might not surprise anyone here, is we ask vaccination status. And to Sean's point, in the crosstab, you would think, well, certainly the people who aren't vaccinated are going to think this is, a really good idea because they're, with RFK and, and they're, about health or, in their opinions. But no, they're about personal decisions, right? And so actually they were very evenly, people are not vaccinated, were very evenly split on this, the people who were not vaccinated. I'm going to say so.
It's funny, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, David, but this just for food for thought for the next time. One of the things that's really fascinating that I'm intrigued on in this area is that there's a lot of people when Kennedy talks about banning dyes and all this kind of stuff, and everyone assumes that it goes over. There's I think a strong thread within the conservative movement that says, I don't necessarily want to ban them, but I want transparency. I want the government to tell me what's in these things. I'll make the decision as a consumer. You don't need to tell me what I can and can't have. I just don't want to be, I don't want to be gaslit. I don't want to be lied to. I want to know what's in these products. I am smart enough to make my own decisions. And I think that there's a line in Maha world between banning things and telling me what's in them, and I'll make the right choice as a consumer. And and obviously I'm just saying that I think that this whole area is fascinating in terms of public opinion because I think that there are different threads within it.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna keep going. So this one's from Terry Ann on court challenges. I thought this was not good for Trump, but pretty much which of these statements do you agree with more, even if neither is exactly right? Regarding the large number of court challenges against the Trump administration, and what you're seeing here is they show the Trump administration has pursued a large number of unconstitutional policies at 48%, whether as the bias and significant bias in the judicial system being at 35%. Again, a major I think that's a major problem for Trump as he moves forward in this. Moving on, please do stop me again if I need to. I just want to make sure I can get through this. So do you think that the mainstream media has covered Trump fairly? How do you think they covered Trump's administration the first 100 days? So 62% said it's been fair so far. Everyone look at those crosstabs.
Super interesting question. And I'm a little surprised that only 23 of Republicans said very unfair.
Yeah.
Me too. Yes, me as well. So, but
I mean, as many, according to the poll, as many said very fair as very unfair.
I know.
It probably depends, Mark, on where you're getting your news, right?
Yeah. And also, of course, maybe even despite the tensions, the fact that people are being allowed in to see the president. Jeffrey Goldberg on Morning Joe this morning said, I was allowed in to see Donald Trump. Joe said to him, would Joe Biden have let you in like that? And he scoffed at it. Said, of course not. I didn't have that kind of access. So,
by the way, to your follow-up, Dean in the chat is asking this. I think next time we really should delve down on where people are getting their news, because I think that's significant. And I also think the one thing that's interesting to me that I've learned is we traditionally talk about Republicans and Democrats. And I think there's still a split in the Republican Party between Donald Trump supporters, MAGA supporters, MAGA people, and mainstream Republicans. Because I think that there's a lot of people on the Republican traditional party who might think one thing, who necessarily aren't hardcore Trump supporters that don't share the view.
Absolutely, 100%. Great point.
The next question may be a similar topic as well. No, okay. There's another one on the media as well here in a minute, but we'll get there in a second. Okay, so which of these statements do you agree with more, even if neither is exactly right? And this was a fun question from Jason. Trump believes both China and Russia are adversaries of the United States. He believes China is, but Russia is not. Russia is, but China is not, or that neither of them are adversaries. So you can see 27% saying he believes both of them are adversaries. I don't know what to take from this. Y'all might have more thoughts than I do. I think it's an interesting question, though, so I'm glad we got it. I would not have asked it.
It's just fascinating as we talk about Ukraine and tariffs and yep.
Okay, this is a fun one too. So this is thinking about your closest friends who are not family members, how many of them belong to the opposite party as you?
Whoa.
And you can see none at 30%, 1 to 2. Again, another question that probably never would have existed if it weren't for the People's Poll, because
that is great.
Pollsters don't think that, and politicians, and we don't think to ask it. It's a fun one though. And again, this will get shared afterwards. So if there's an interesting insight, stop me, but I'm going to keep going.
Yep, keep going.
Okay, this is another good one. Do you agree or disagree that I believe most Americans share the same core values? We did age here instead of party, but well, party one. Okay, to what extent do you believe the congressional Democrats have lost their credibility for their role in covering up Joe Biden's physical mental decline? I do think that 41% is not a good number on the Dem side, and the 12%, the Democrats got some issues with it.
That's a great question, Mary Beth.
Yeah.
Really interesting. I haven't seen that anywhere.
Sure
Super interesting.
By the way, it's the Dems. Look, they can. I think that it's actually. I'm surprised that it's as high as it is among Dem voters. Their big concern should be that independent number.
Yep. 100%.
By the way, the audience questions are winning over our questions big time.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah.
Well done.
I'll say this. We got some really good ones we didn't get to include, and including some that came in late that were just really fun and funny. And so we're gonna have a great one on the next time. Okay, we got a couple questions on the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. So both of them were asked the same way. Well, John asked one of them, we added the other. But if Russia refuses to engage in good faith negotiations for a lasting peace with Ukraine or undermines the sovereignty of Ukraine after peace is negotiated, do you support increasing sanctions against Russia? Okay, obviously you're seeing a lot of support for increasing sanctions against Russia. So the same question, but asking if you support increasing or what level of financial support the United States provide to Ukraine. Obviously you're seeing only 23% saying increase or significant increase. And again, this is contingent on Russia refusing good faith negotiations and so forth. So, obviously if you were to compare this to 2 years ago, it would be, dramatically different where, everyone, the majority of people would be saying increased support. So it's been a big shift in public opinion on financial support to Ukraine. So another good question.
Go ahead, Mark and Sean. You can say it. You guys were right. I was wrong.
There you go.
Okay, we have more. We'll put out the full results. That's the ones from the two-way community. We do have a couple more from the two-way team, Mark, but I don't know. We've spent a good amount of time. You tell me if you want to.
Well, just to say, I only submitted one question, and David and I want to make it clear to everybody that these don't have to be questions just about politics, right? It's a great time to sample public opinion on anything. So just show mine. Again, you'll get all these questions, but just so you know, I purposely didn't do a political question, even though I had plenty. Sean and Dan and Pacha and others covered it. But just go to mine. I think it's the next one. Who is of these four musical acts? Who are the GOAT? The Beatles, Taylor Swift, Elvis Presley, and Beyonce. And although thank goodness the Beatles won because it's the obvious answer, they didn't win by a lot over the King and Taylor. So again, want to make that point for the.
You didn't ask one person involved in yacht rock. I would have put Christopher Cross or Michael McDonald in there.
They would have gotten it. Don't know.
I would not have put Elvis as most popular amongst his fans at 18 to 34-year-olds. That is interesting.
There you go.
Not even the Grateful Dead. I mean, there was a lot that got overlooked in there.
Three things I want to.
Stones.
I know we've limited ourselves to four. I almost put the Stones in, but I wanted a little diversity of chronology. Anyway, three things I want to say besides thanks to David and Peyton and the other folks at Wick and how great we are. How great they were. Number one, I'm so excited that you all got to see Sean and Dan colloquiing with David, because that's the kind of discussion that people have in political organizations and news organizations when they run through a new poll. Probably most of you have never seen it. We've all got to have that experience of the kind of back and forth, asking questions, making points. I'm glad you got to see that. And again, that'll be part of this. Second, so excited to have the First People's Poll. And I hope those of you who submitted questions that were used are super excited to be part of it, and glad that we had you part of it. In the future, we're going to make sure you're fine with, if you'd like us to identify you by first, last name, and hometown, we're happy to give you even more credit. We just went with first names this time. And then lastly, as we do more, I've already apologized for getting the email address wrong in my Substack. As we do more, we'll welcome your submissions. And we got a ton, and I suspect after today, we'll get even more. David, thank you. I'm going to open it up for questions.
Awesome.
I'd like them to be about the poll or about Mike Waltz. If you have questions on other topics, put your hand down for now. We'll get some folks in. And then we're going to run through a few other stories that we want to talk about, just so we're caught up. But for now, let's get to folks in. If you got questions about the poll or about the National Security Advisor, come on in, and we'll take a few, and then we'll go. Liz, welcome in. Unmute yourself if you would. Thank you for joining. Tell folks where you are, what's on your mind. There you go.
I didn't have my hand up.
You didn't have your hand up?
I'm just happily no.
I thought you,
Nice
I
to
thought you
see
did.
everyone.
I apologize. All right, Liz, as long as you're here, do you want to ask something? I apologize. I thought you did.
Oh my gosh.
You don't need to. It's all good.
No,
My fault. All
I'm
right.
good right now. I love
All
that
right.
poll. That's yeah,
All
cool.
right. You just came on to endorse the
You
poll.
caught
Thank
up.
you. Amber, unmute, please. Welcome in. Thank
Happens
you
all
for
the time.
joining. My apologies to Liz. Amber, welcome in. Thank you for joining. You do have your hand up. Tell folks where you
I do
are,
have my hand up.
what's on your mind, and thank you for being part of
I'm
T1.
in central Indiana, and my question is somewhat related to, I think, kind of the friend question from the poll, and a little bit related to what uh, I think his name was Stephen Becker talked about the other day, and you mentioned yesterday on, or a couple days ago on your show,
Yeah.
the phenomenon of people not wanting to criticize Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And
It's a great
I
topic.
was kind of thinking about that in the context of my own circle of people. And I'm wondering if you guys think maybe that could be an age-related thing. Um, I feel like the people that I associate with, who I'm 36, and my friends would be like middle millennials, I guess you could say. And they don't have, despite being many of them avid Trump supporters, um, don't have any issue criticizing or calling out when um, the administration kind of goes in a direction that we don't like. I think the Maha movement is a lot of moms my age, and you saw that grassroots situation with the confirmations. And like, for example, I know Sean might not like to hear this, but Brooke Rollins was one that we really were concerned about, and there was a lot of talk about that on X. There was a lot of talk about that on Instagram. A lot of the influencers that I follow that would be my age and maybe a little bit older have no issue calling out Donald Trump in spite of being supportive. But
It's a
then I
really,
look at
go ahead, Amber. Sorry.
people who are older than my parents. My parents are in their mid 50s, but my husband's parents are in their 60s. And certainly they, I think, have a hard time saying, like, we don't like this aspect of what they're doing. And I don't know if that's because maybe they've spent so much time being criticized that they just won't take it, or if they have, or if it's just a loyalty thing. But it's not necessarily something that I've noticed in millennials, and definitely not Gen Z.
Yeah.
And
Amber,
yes, Central
super,
Indiana.
super interesting point, Amber. I'd love to hear Sean, Dan, David, all of you. What do you think of Amber's supposition that this may be an age thing?
Hey, Mark, let me actually say something real quick. I'll let Sean and maybe Dan give their analysis a little more of that. But this is a great opportunity for a chance when y'all are having these conversations, say, hey, let's write this down. Maybe we can put something to measure this in the next people's poll. And so we'll create a question and see, and you don't have to come up with it, but that's part of what our team can do and say, hey, I wonder if there's a way we can kind of get some insights on generational, willingness to criticize a certain party or person and stuff like that. So just want to add, that's another great way to get questions, even if you don't have one on the top of your head. Maybe, that's our team's job, is to figure it out. But I'll let Dan and Sean reply to that. Just want to put that plug in.
Yeah, thank you for that, David. Sean, what do you think of what Amber asked?
I think it's fascinating, the whole subject that you're bringing up, Amber, because and actually it's interesting. I'll shoot from the hip, but I also think it's something that it's worthy of actually reflecting deeper on. And I say this like respectfully to David to think about as well, because I'm not even sure that you can get to it with a single poll question. And so I say this kind of like it would be interesting to see, because I don't think that like one answer is the thing. And so as you're talking, I'll just give you my perspective, Amber. And again, this is a snapshot. I could probably go on for a lot longer, and the time is tight here. For me, a lot of this is personal. When when I doing what I have done in the past, watching some people pop off with pieces of information or incorrect information to make snap decisions about me or about something that I have said or done. It makes it a lot harder. It makes me think twice when I see people who are friends of mine who I've known for a while, whether it's Pete Hegseth or JD Van, or Don or any of these guys, or work for the president, and to realize that in many cases, what you're hearing or what someone is accusing them is a fraction of the story or a piece of it. So having been through it myself, I tend to be a little bit more careful of how I go after people that I consider friends and supporters. And so it's a very personal thing for me. And I recognize that that's a little different from a lot of what you're addressing. But I think that there is something about the team. When I read stories about things that happened in the press, about something that Trump said or whatever, you realize that I would argue 70–80% of the time, there's a lot more of the story than the New York Times or Politico. I have been the victim of many Politico stories that were 100% false, never happened. And so when I read something from half of these folks accusing my former boss or someone that I worked with or is a friend of mine, I tend to not jump to the conclusion or want to protect them because I know the motives of a lot of these folks in the media or a lot of folks on the left.
Dan.
I think fantastic question. And as I thought about it here in the last few minutes, I think on the Democratic side, the ones that are most closed-minded are the younger, kind of that 18 to 35-year-olds. I think some of it is they have been raised in a generation the last decade that has really been kind of right, wrong, like a lot of this stuff that they've been taught and their friend groups, it's just right and wrong. And I think hopefully that will change. I find a lot of older Democrats are more open to self-reflection and criticism.
Amber, thank you. Very grateful to you for coming on. Alicia, welcome in. Thank you for joining. Tell folks who don't know after you unmute where you are, what's on your mind.
Hi, I am in the northern neck of Virginia, where the Little Wacomico River meets the Potomac and the Chesapeake Bay. This is my first time for being called on. Grateful to you.
Thank you for being part of it.
I am fascinated by this poll. Sorry that I missed the questions, but very interested in the age group comparisons of how this goes, because to give you a little background about me, I was a never voter until I voted for Trump the first time. I lost my head in the sand for his second run and voted for him the third time. So I found two-way by Mark being a contributor on Newsmax through some cousins and alternate media. So very grateful that I have, in my 70s, come to the point where I'm actually interested in politics and how you guys present it and create language and communication for people like me.
That's great.
Very grateful to you. Well said and much appreciated by us. Thank you for that.
And Mark,
you're welcome.
Mark, and just might worth be noting here because of her question that in addition to the results, all the crosstabs will be sent out as well, which, not the easiest thing to read all the time if you're not used to it, but they do have all the age breakdowns for every question.
Yeah. So again, one of the things we're going to do with the People's Poll is be transparent about the methodology and all the data, because we want this to be seen not as a fake poll, in quotes. We want people to respect the results. Not every poll's accurate, not every poll's definitive, but as a snapshot in time with some really great questions and input, we're hoping you whether you support Donald Trump or you oppose him, whether you're young or old, no matter where you live, you can look at this poll and say, okay, I read all about how this poll worked, how they conducted it, who was polled, etc., and have confidence that it's an unbiased effort to capture public opinion. Alicia, did you want to say or ask anything else, or did you get to say what you wanted? Okay, thank you for coming in. Very grateful to you. I'm told that there was a shouted question to Stephen Miller and the press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, as they left the briefing about Mike Waltz, and they declined to answer it. They walked out. So no reaction yet, as far as I know, from the administration on that. All right. Let me just see here. See if we can get one more question.
Isn't that the answer if they decline to answer?
Not
they
necessarily.
Confirm Mark's report. Just tweet
not necessarily. Ed, welcome in. Thank you for joining. Unmute. Tell folks who you are, what's on your where you are, and what's on your mind after you unmute. Yeah, but hit unmute, Ed. Give you one more moment. All right. David, while Ed works on that, we'll give him another moment or two. David, are you going to post the information on the WIC website, or are we just going to send it through my Substack?
Post on the website and send it out through your Substack as well.
All right. So tell people where they can go to see it on your website.
wick.io, and you'll be able to go to the blog page. There's a page called blog. It'll be open up this afternoon.
Okay. So you'll get it in my Substack later today, and you can read it on the WIC website as well. Ed, I apologize. We'll work with you for next time. All right, guys. David, thank you. Really grateful to you, and we'll talk soon. Guys, I just want to run through just real quick, rapid round, some of the other topics in the news. Just a sentence from each of you on each of them, real quick. Sean, where do you see Putin and Xi right now? Where's the movement coming in dealing with China and Russia? Anywhere that you see moving today?
Well, look, I think this Ukraine minerals deal last night, and if you haven't watched Secretary Bessett's announcement of it, go watch it, because he talks specifically about this long-term financial deal now means that the U.S. has got a stronger relationship in Ukraine. It's a cudgel against Russia. I mean, look, and actually go look at where the minerals are in Ukraine and what territory. I mean, this is such a huge deal for us. Not just, and for Ukraine, it gives Ukraine some financial assurances that the U.S. is there, and it makes Russia very, very, it puts Russia on notice that you come after this land now, you're coming after us, right? Yeah. So we now have a financial incentive to protect it. This is a great deal for the U.S. It's a great deal for Ukraine, and I think that this moves the needle and puts Putin on his heels right now.
Dan, either China or Russia?
I'm hopeful, but I think it's optimistic thinking they're near breaking.
Yeah. If you haven't read the Wall Street Journal story on pressure in China because of the tariffs, I recommend it to you. It makes a strong case that the administration might be correct, that China is feeling the heat from the tariffs, and that
that New York. Yeah. I mean,
they're feeling the heat, but they got a lot of levers to pull as a communist society.
They do, yeah. But I'll tell you that's not getting reported how bad they're feeling the heat from this.
The journal story does a very nice job on it, and it probably understates the case. Real quick, again, we got 2 minutes to cover 5 topics. Sean, what did you think of the president saying fewer dolls that'll cost more for Christmas? Good idea, bad idea?
Can we talk about Kamala Harris's speech last night?
Okay.
And Tim Walz at Harvard too, by the way.
Yeah. Oh. All right. Do you want to talk about that? Dan, what do you think of the president saying that?
I'm going to let Sean's remarks stand for themselves.
Okay.
About Kamala?
Dan, Kamala, what is the impact of Kamala Harris's 16-minute speech last night?
Now what? Where does she go from here?
Yeah.
It was just a great reminder how cringy she is. Between her and Tim Walz yesterday could not have done more to allow Democrats to say, thank God that she didn't, win. It was the two of them combined in 24 hours. It was so bad. Tim Walz talking about he's a code talker to white men who watch football in their trucks. And I'm like, dude, your pronouns are dumb and dumber.
Yeah. All right. Dan, the White House has created a rival to the Drudge Report. The Drudge Report used to be reliably pro-Trump, pro-conservative, pro-Republican. In the last few years, as Matt Drudge's role has changed on the site, it's become pretty anti-Trump. And the White House, rather than sitting back, has created an alternative. Looks like the Drudge Report. It's got bells and whistles that Drudge doesn't have. What do you think of the significance of this?
I think it's humorous going to war against Matt Drudge. Like, I'm sure the White House will win. Matt, I think, has been less influential the last decade than he once was. But they're always selling.
So look, I would just say this, and this is not this isn't personal against Matt. I probably haven't looked at the Drudge Report in at least 10 years. And I don't know many conservatives who do. It's just not what it once was. That being said, look, I know everyone's trying to do this as a troll, the Drudge Report, but I think the White House has been fantastic about their messaging and how they're creating the Response 47 Twitter account. Like, they have been driving news. There's more to come, is all I'll say. I don't want to get ahead of their announcements, but during Trump 1, there was a whole discussion about Trump TV and all this. They are building platforms to speak directly to the American people where they are. and in ways it hasn't been happened before. So it's not just it's getting through to influencers, it's putting out direct information and quotes and clips. So these guys are on their A game when it comes to communicating with the American people on the platforms they're at a time when they're at, in a place where they're at. So this is phenomenal. And like I said, I think you're going to see more to come in the next week or two.
Except they sound like Baghdad Bob now sometimes with some of these ludicrous statements about everything being honky-dory. It's just comical.
All right. I've got a ton to share, which I'm going to do in a moment. Sean, first thing I'll say, Sean needs to go a little bit early. Sean, thank you. Have a great day. Sean is off tomorrow. He's on assignment. You're welcome to tell people or not, but Sean won't be here tomorrow. So announcing right now, guest hosting on the morning meeting, making his first hosting appearance on television, New York Congressman Mike Lawler will be filling Sean's big shoes tomorrow. So Sean will be not here, but Dan and Mike Lawler will be here tomorrow to have our normal day, including, don't forget, we got to remind the congressman, he needs winner and loser of the week and what to look for this weekend.
I'll text Mike and give him a couple ideas for winner and loser.
Right. Okay. Then coming up today, lots of things to tell you about coming up today. First of all, two-way tonight will be done live at 2:30 Eastern time. It'll still stream on YouTube at 6 o'clock like normal. But if you want to be part of the conversation at 2:30, join then. We'll talk about the story involving the national security team. We'll also have Jonathan, help me out, guys. Jonathan.
Allen.
Jonathan Allen. Thank you. John Allen.
And Amy Parnas.
And Amy Parnas. Thank you. Will be here to talk about 2028. We're going to talk about the Democratic field in particular, look at some of Kamala Harris's speech from last night, talk about what's happened with Gretchen Whitmer and Gavin Newsom, lots of 2028 talk. So join us live at 2:30 Eastern time. Again, if you want to watch it on YouTube, it'll stream at 6 p.m. and then on demand after that. Also today here on Two-Way, the Moynihan Report will stream right after at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Michael Moynihan will be on with Clay Risen, the author of Red Scare, Blacklist, McCarthyism, and the Making of Modern America. So you can watch that starting at 7 p.m. Eastern time here. And a big announcement about our friend Meghan McCain. Meghan is such an important part of Two-Way, and the show's off to a great start. If you didn't see yesterday's episode, I strongly recommend it to you with Joe Concha. Meghan is bringing to us, to Two-Way, her podcast, Citizen McCain, and she's changing the name of her program to Citizen McCain. And all future episodes are going to be on the Citizen McCain YouTube channel at noon, Mondays and Wednesdays. So the show's moving from 5 p.m. Eastern to noon Eastern time. Same show, same great guests, changing the name to Citizen McCain. You can still be part of the Two-Way conversation. You can sign up to be part of that, but it'll be on the Citizen McCain YouTube channel at noon Eastern time, again on Mondays and Wednesdays. More to remind you of, more to tell you about. My program Next Up will drop later today on YouTube and as a podcast. My guest, California Governor Gavin Newsom. I can tell you we're going to make a little news with Governor Newsom. And one of the things we're going to do with him is we're going to dispel what I call the 4 Newsom myths. 4 things that I hear all the time about Gavin Newsom that I don't believe are true. We'll see what he says. So join me for that at YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts later today. Watch my Twitter feed to find out when it will drop. All right, Noah or Paul or anyone else, did I forget anything that I'm supposed to tell everybody about?
You told everything to everybody.
Okay, good. Again, later today in my Substack, the deck, the polling deck that includes contributions from you in the Two-Way community. Thank you again for that. As well as the crosstabs will be available both in my Substack, as I said, and on the WIC website. So you can read the poll to your heart's content. Dan, closing remarks.
I'll be on with Laura Ingraham tonight.
Amazing.
Otherwise, Mark, seriously, Mark, fantastic job today. I mean, just both on this show and what the news you broke and everything that you're doing and building. Kudos.
Very nice of you. Very happy to have you as my partner in all of this. Thank you all for watching. Thanks for the questions and not just the questions that people came on today, but I'm so excited about the People's Poll and having all of you be involved. I hope those of you who didn't submit a question this time are inspired to the next time and get the sense of the, I'll say the word, empowerment that you can be part of putting a poll together for 1,000 Americans to give their point of view. And again, our thanks to Peyton and David and others at WIC for being our partners on this. I will see you on Next Up, and I'll see you again, 2:30 Eastern time. Don't forget, live if you want to be part of the two-way conversation, 2:30 Eastern time today with John Allen and Amy talking about the poll. Not talking about the poll, talking about 2028 and the update on what's going on at the national security team. Thank you. Have a great day.